All right, we are live December the 2nd, 2025. And I'm working on a draft for one of these mind maps because the objective here is to take something very complex and explain it in as concise a manner as possible. I don't know if we can make it simple, but we can remove anything extraneous and just get down to the basic premise and how we support it. And I'm examining the Charlie Kirk event, but specifically Erika Kirk and her role in this ever since. And I came back to revisit this because Candace Owens is claiming that she's going to drop some information today about how Turning Point USA betrayed Charlie. Now, this is getting interesting because Tyler Boylan, the director of operations at TPUSA, has been accused of embezzling from TPUSA for years. So you got a guy named Tyler being accused of having betrayed Charlie Kirk. So think about that. Tyler Robinson, the shooter. Tyler betrays him. The name Tyler is a reoccurring theme in all of the predictive programming going back to the very beginning, 1998, with the Tyler the Executioner in the boxing match in Snake Eyes, where the Charlie Kirkland gets shot in the neck. Well, all these various movies that contain this predictive content for the event are related. Like the femme fatale blonde who's next to Charlie Kirkland in Snake Eyes when he gets shot. Yeah, she becomes Vice President Kirk in 2025 Heads of State. But this is the part that got me thinking. I've been hearing the word Jezebel quite a bit. And so I look it up, and it has to do with this idea of the way it's used in the modern context. A Jezebel refers to a promiscuous or deceitful woman. So there's this element of betrayal. So here you have Tyler betraying. Now, if you go back to the Emerson Drive music video, which again hits all the same points, Erika Kirk is in a music video called My Kinda Crazy. She's My Kinda Crazy. And in the video, she zip lines past the date 9/10. And that stood out to a lot of people as very strange. So she zip lines past the 9/10 above the word Fremont, which you could read into that, but we're going to stick with just the 9/10. And the idea she's flying past it, some have associated that with, witches flying. But anyway, it's the way she's being characterized because we're looking at it right now as she's being described by people on the world stage, being accused of being pregnant with someone else's kid, the leather pants and J.D. Vance's hug and all that stuff. This stuff has all been manufactured, is what I'm saying. So if you look at that music video, in the comments, she says, "Thanks, Tyler, for a great shoot. I had a blast." And that comment referencing somebody named Tyler, referencing a shoot and a blast, happened to be on 9/10/2012, because you can check the date that the comments are posted. I think Jurassic Liars figured that one out. So exactly 13 years prior to the event, she's thanking a Tyler for a shoot in a video referencing 9/10. So my point of it is, these are reoccurring themes. The name Tyler. So Tyler the Executioner, Tyler in the movie shoot. And then in the Thought Crimes podcast number 33, Tyler is having a conversation with Charlie. And Charlie's mentioning something about televised executions. And Tyler says, by the way, the last televised execution was on September 10th, 1977, referring to one in France, which, brings up the guillotine, the neck wound theme. But the very specific date, 9/10, spoken by a guy named Tyler to Charlie. So again, it hits all the same points. But now, after the event, you had the big memorial ceremony where 99,999 people cried. Basically everybody but Erika. And at that ridiculous event, with all the fireworks, the WWE backdrop just made no sense. But we watched that event, and Steve Miller, I think his name is Stephen Miller, someone who works at TPUSA, called Erika the Storm. So that automatically got me thinking. One, she's literally called the Storm. And then two, people were already saying after her appearance that she ought to be vice president under J.D. Vance. So I'm paying attention to her, however, because of the parallel in Hulu's The Tempest, which came out on 9/10, where the main character, where the protagonist is the widow. She's the main character, but the husband dies by getting shot in the neck in the same way Charlie Kirk was in front of his audience. And there's so many overlaps between Hulu's The Tempest and the Charlie Kirk event that have been overlooked by the people who looked into the snake eyes, that I'm convinced that there's a lot of misdirection going on. Because if you looked at the stuff that's released real time, it would change your whole perspective if you haven't already looked at it and considered the implications. Gematria calculator people aren't ready for this. False flaggers aren't ready for this. Candace Owens fans aren't ready to process this. But anyway, so the Tempest, it means a storm. In fact, I'm reading the Tempest right now with the wizard Prospero crashing the boat on the island. And it's interesting, but I'm reading it now because I think it might relate to this story. But the show The Tempest is about the widow taking over the Youth Republicans, just as Erika Kirk took over TPUSA. The widow in The Tempest fake cries on TV in order to connect emotionally with her deceased husband's base, the Youth Republicans. She needed to connect, so she had to be emotional and show vulnerability on TV, which she does. Later, she's accused of not even loving him, using him, and being part of the conspiracy, possibly. And one of the characters suggests that grief is ugly. Your grief was too dignified, calling her crying fake. So everything we've seen with regard to Erika Kirk had been preceded by what was in Hulu's The Tempest, which was released on September 10th. So I've been looking at this thing. So then we got the Tempest reference. And the Tempest in the show, I believe, is a reference to the widow. So this is another connection, because Erika Kirk is then called the Storm. So you got the Storm, the Tempest, the widow, the accusations of being a deceiver, a betrayer. Now you go back to the music video, and you could insinuate here, or you could look at an insinuation of she's thanking Tyler for the shoot. So if you look at the bigger story connecting these things, it almost implies that this was where she's thanking the assassin. Now hear me out, because Snake Eyes takes place against the backdrop of Hurricane Jezebel. And, well, I'm adding to it here. If this stuff is repetitive to you, you're missing the point. People say, oh, it's a distraction. We think it's fake. Let's move on. Where has that gotten you? How many years have you been looking into conspiracy theories, noticing fake things, and you haven't figured it out? Honestly, you're wasting your time is what you're doing if it's not doing anything. You haven't heard this before, and this isn't even a show for entertainment. This is a think tank for media analysts realizing that media is not what we've been sold, and alternative media is complete controlled opposition. So if you're looking for the next shiny object, go listen to Candace Owens. She'll give you another conspiracy fairy tale. But honestly, that's not what we do here. So, I don't know how to help you with that. So in the 1998 Snake Eyes, they reference the storm and they call it Jezebel. So you see the connection here. Storm, Jezebel. And what is a Jezebel, as we described? The betrayer, the deceiver. You've got the widow in The Tempest, referred to as a betrayer, a deceiver. Erika Kirk literally called the storm, and now what are people saying about her? Right now as we speak, there's these viral videos accusing or suggesting that she's pregnant. and that it's probably the baby of J.D. Vance. And then you got Frank Turek right now, who just the other day, he's talking about this stuff, and he's saying, and Frank Turek, of course, is the guy who was behind Charlie during the shooting. Let me see if I can find my notes here. John Francis says, I have TDS. Well, look, this is the thing. We're looking at 3 different categories of propaganda. You have the predictive stuff, then you have the real-time stuff, and then you have the reinforcement. And right now we're experiencing a lot of the reinforcement stuff. These things exist on a timeline. They're inserting fake events into our historical record. It doesn't take a genius. It doesn't take a Candace Owens subscriber, to be able to call something fake. Like, oh, look, that's fake. Okay, it's fake. Move on. Anybody telling you to move on doesn't understand what they're looking at. Like, anybody can call things fake today. That's not a high standard. It's actually predictable. So what we're doing here is we're making sense of it. And no one else has. That's one of my points here. No one else has. Well, anyway, Frank Turek is suggesting that Erika Kirk could be on a ticket with J.D. Vance. So this is a injected narrative. Vice President Erika Kirk. And of course we have now Heads of State came out in 2025, VP Kirk, who also gets shot in the neck. So then you have this element added to it. VP Kirk, and that actress is the same actress that plays the Jezebel in Snake Eyes. So my point of it is, we're looking at 27 years of entertainment content, all connected. They're all connected to a singular psyop. So we're looking at psyop reinforcement content, and this applies to every single event. We were recently talking about the Annunciation school shooting and Stranger Things and the movie Weapons. In fact, now that Stranger Things has a new season out, I'm going to do a deeper dive into how Stranger Things was used to platform and condition us for this new wave of mass shooters who are coming from the left, who are anti-Christian instead of Christian nationalist, who are Reddit radicalized and have Antifa values rather than Discord and woke right stuff. Well, how do they pivot? How did they just change the face of the mass shooter, the school shooter? How do they just do a plot twist like that? Well, they had to engineer it. And I kind of saw the pivot really beginning with Vegas when I saw, wait a minute, why are they shooting country music concerts? Well, it's because the schools are easy to ignore. It's almost repetitive, where the public just gets desensitized to it. And the country music fans would presumably be those who love guns. So then you have the irony of their own guns are being used against them, which was one of the points made with the Charlie Kirk thing, where he's being asked something about gun violence and he gets shot. I would list, and I think I might have, when we look at hoax indicators, I would put irony or ironic twists among the list of hoax indicators. Till says, Tim, can you do a deep dive on Begonia? There's a conspiracy guy with a rifle in his pant leg mixed with aliens. Sure. Send me a link or post it in Discord. I mean, we'll consider anything, because what we're doing here is and this is probably what intelligent counterspell doesn't get. One, we have to establish the truth of what we're saying, that this is a model. It has predictive capabilities. It accurately describes what we're seeing better than the mainstream and alternative perspectives. So first of all, we haven't even done that. Like, stop patting yourself on the back for calling things fake. Like, that's really not insightful. You can't say it looks fake to me. Like, what's your argument? It looks fake? That's not good enough. And it's not going to pass in the future anyway, the way that generative AI is progressing. I mean, I believe 99% of the stuff the first watch. So you have to have situational awareness that you bring into these things. It's not enough to call things fake just based on the visuals. So how do you actually describe something? How do you make the case? Could you prove to somebody who's never considered that the media lies, that the event that they just saw was fake just by pointing at the screen? Well, no, it doesn't work that way. It'd be like trying to debate a believer against their religious beliefs by citing their own Bible. It's like you have to get outside of their frame of reference. They're in a closed informational system. And if you're just calling things fake, you haven't even left Trutherville, because they call things fake all the time. It's all about context and point of view. So what is the context for this Kirk thing? Is that we're looking at, I would suggest that this is a JFK scale event. It has a great deal of cultural and political significance. And specifically, it has a lot of significance to conspiracy culture, which I consider to be a government manufactured counterculture. Anybody who's part of the conspiracy culture, other than just those who are being ironic about it, but the people who are really activists for it, they're basically just pushing propaganda, on behalf of Big Brother, and all of it reinforces the world stage paradigm. It's not out of the box thinking. It's actually definitionally closed-minded, because the number of options they have are constrained because there's a blind spot built into that perspective. Enos says, what if Charlie had to fake his death because Erika picked him with J.D. Vance and Charlie has no choice but... Well, see, the thing is, okay, Charlie did not fake his death. Charlie Kirk did not fake his death and trick all these people. Charlie Kirk is an actor in a psychological warfare operation, but one that takes place over a long period of time. So we're looking at not just a isolated psyop, but we're looking at a manufactured history. So we have our real world that we live in, that we can test, that we can record, we can experience and acknowledge as objectively real. But then you have a series of significant events that are going to be in the history books, that are going to dominate the news cycle, but are entirely manufactured. And all of these manufactured events represent essentially an alternate timeline, or an augmentation to our timeline, because these things are occurring with regularity. So he's just an actor in a larger play. So it's not accurate to say he faked his death. And what's more, the indication that we have here regarding the predictive content and how consistent it is going back is that his character was actually on a script to enter the world stage at 18, get $1 billion backer, start TP USA, which already has significant connections to the right-wing Turner Diaries mythos. But that aside, it was already known when he took the gig, or when he was assigned, that he was going to be fake killed at 31. So it's not like this was some kind of a surprise. It's not like they just thought of it. No, it was planned in advance. And this is what we're doing, is we're mapping out all of the reinforcement content that goes into every single psyop, and using that information to ascertain how far back the event was planned. So the indications that we get from Snake Eyes and all these other examples would suggest that not only did the script for this event, and was this event planned in the 90s, before Charlie Kirk was even Charlie Kirk, because we don't know anything about, how authentic these people are. But you can also, I guess, infer from this that Erika Kirk and Charlie Kirk weren't really married. I mean, this is all theater. So you have to recognize that this is part of essentially a concurrent reality TV show. The way that they're faking history, it's functioning analogous to reality TV, because they're using news media, media in general, every single propaganda conduit that they can, every vector is used to reinforce the existence of these fake events. It's an illusion. They're creating these illusions on a daily basis. But my point of it is, these things aren't done spontaneously. They're not making it up as they go. We're living through a manufactured timeline. Yeah, exactly, Osam. Kayfabe is never off. So same thing with Trump. Like, and this is why you have to change your point of view. The point of view that Charlie Kirk faked his death doesn't invalidate the entire TPUSA story. Like, the whole thing has got to be just a construct. You can't look at it as serious anymore. It's all grass or fake grassroots, what are called astroturf. They inflate their numbers. I mean, these are all manufactured characters. But it has significant implications when you consider how these things are planned in advance. It means that Donald Trump didn't trick the world by faking like his ear got shot. Donald Trump is an actor performing a magic trick, but everybody around him, the media included, and the Secret Service, would necessarily have been part of that hoax. So the word hoax doesn't even do it justice, because we're not talking about a trick that a small group or a person pulls off that tricks the world. The media is not being tricked. The media is the trickster. The media is not being fooled by some very slick propaganda production. And I mean, the low-level people in media are certainly being tricked. I mean, but what I'm saying is the media manufactures these events. And then everybody else who's not in on it reinforce it by acting like it's real. And that's what I mean by reinforcement programming. So every major fake event is foreshadowed by predictive programming. When the event happens, we're inundated with concurrent programming. And drills are usually attendant. I mean, there's almost always a drill as a parallel to the event, just off to the side somewhere. You know, that was true with that UPS crash, by the way. They had like 150 mass casualty actors, probably wearing squibs. So you have the content that leads up to the event, which you could look at as a form of conditioning. You could look at it as product placement, of making you suggestible and receptive. You know how you think of something, like if somebody says, or if you think about it, white cars or something, you're more likely to see them. Well, they were already there, but now you're noticing them. You've been primed. So the predictive content that we get primes us as well. So they frame the event in our minds before it even happens. This is actually interesting, because you got like these characters who are essentially mirroring characters in movies. Like Luigi Mangione is definitely Joker coded. In fact, he was in court smiling at the audience. I mean, it's totally Joker, which the Joker movie has built into its storyline, class warfare, kill the rich. And so there's a lot of overlap, especially if you get into the Joker De Niro connection, and De Niro, the taxi driver, the inspiration for Reagan shooter. That's another area we'll get into. But, you know, for right now, what I'm pointing out is we're prepared for the events before they happen. And then when they happen, they're reinforced by the conspicuously timed content on every major streaming service. Like, this was just the case with the crown jewels that were stolen. You know, crown jewels stolen during the No Kings protest. Okay, that's interesting. Well, then Netflix has a show called Lupin, where the characters are breaking into the Louvre and stealing Marie Antoinette's necklace. And so this is noticed by the media, Inside Edition, like, oh, look, Netflix seems to be psychic again. But then after everything, after the event is performed, what do we get? We get nothing but reinforcement programming. Endless conversation about it. This has been months of conjecture about who killed Charlie Kirk. Well, what they're doing with this is they're just reinforcing the acceptance of the fact that he's dead now. Like, every single day, they're reinforcing the scenario. They're making it realer. That's what they're doing. It's not like they're getting closer to the truth. There's no investigation. This is how they cement these events into our collective worldview, into our history. These things are being baked into the history books. So you may know it's fake. You have a lot of reasons to think so, but does it matter? No. Your insights don't matter because your perspective isn't acknowledged. The only perspectives that are acknowledged are the mainstream and then the subsets, which are conspiracy theories and wokeism. But these are perspectives which don't subtract from what the media presents. They just add on to it. They opine about it, but they don't actually subtract. They don't operate on the premise that media is a liar and needs to be vetted anytime it says something, which to me just sounds naive in 2025. And their power to lie has been exponentially increased with generative AI and the general public's inability now to differentiate real from fake. Like, it's easier than ever to fake stuff. And we've been conditioned the way that we're conditioned to be passive media consumers. We're conditioned to be programmed. It's like they gave us all mind aids and they're releasing mind viruses every day. And that's what's actually happening. JT33 says the world play. Yes. Now, okay, so what we're doing though is we're establishing something here. The person that I blocked in here was like mad that we're still talking about this. And it's like, because you already figured it all out. I don't think you have, because you don't have any voice in the world. This information means absolutely nothing if you just drown it in a sea of irrelevance. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't connect any dots. Nobody's more awake. It's just more of the cognitive dissonance and this living in two worlds, knowing that, oh, we're being brainwashed, but also having no ability to do anything about it or to make sense of it. Like, don't you want to make sense of it? Because this is not a political channel. This is not for activists. What are we actually doing? Well, it's a philosophical problem. If we are confronting mind war, psychological warfare, then how do you get out of it? You think your way out of it. You think your way off the grid. And our perspective is purely objectivist. But the daily news cycles condition people to expect engagement bait, dopamine rushes, the next shiny object, the next conspiracy, the next psyop. And they just run through these things so fast that they see us here taking months to break down a mundane event. And they're just bewildered. Like, why are you still focusing on that? Well, it's because there's not a leash around our neck. We're not being dragged around by mainstream media pundits. We're not being told where to look. I'm not chasing a spotlight like a cat chasing a laser pointer. No, I'm absolutely calm. I'm actually non-reactive. We don't react to the news. So you got these reactors, these triggered reactors who are programmed to consume. And we're still here processing stuff. Because the only thing you get by reacting to news is you get hit with a bunch of headlines and blurbs and there's no depth. So your opinion's going to be limited. It's going to be low information anyway. Anybody who says, I knew the Charlie Kirk thing was fake on the day it happened, I'm like, well, okay, you have your intuition. It's a reasonable guess, sure. But did you have the facts to support that on day one? No. Not at all. So reacting doesn't make sense. You got to give it time. You can respond later when more facts have surfaced. But there's no pressure to come to a conclusion. And anyway, what we're doing here also, since we are in fact a third branch of media, we're outside of the controlled duopoly. We are going through all of the major events, 2025, all the way back to probably starting with the JFK thing. And with each one, we are mapping out all of the relevant predictive programming, concurrent programming, the movie directors around it, and every other element to it that we'd consider to be a hoax indicator. And we're doing this event by event. And then we're creating a parallel timeline. You've got the mainstream perspective on what happened from 1962 to 2025. Then you have the alternative media version, the truther version. And then you have our perspective. And our perspective is inclusive of media fakery and metascript breakdown, which includes all of the foreshadowing, concurrent programming. Duet Celeste says, ironically, the conspiracy theorists miss most psyops like the Hong Kong thing. Well, you see, conspiracy theorists are just alt NPC. They're still being spoon-fed. They're just being spoon-fed a higher dosage of the mind control, because it's like the mainstream doesn't captivate them, and a lot of people don't get into the mainstream. And if you lean left, you kind of go into woke town. If you lean right, you go into Trutherville. But Trutherville is actually split in two, because you got the red pill stuff, and then you have what is actually woke right politics. And it turns out the red pill is actually a subset. Because you can't mainstream a lot of the ideas on the fringe right, but if you repackage them, you can sell it to a wider audience. There's a lot more people willing to hunt down Illuminati reptilians than who are willing to take stances against people based on ethnicity or the idea of preserving one's own tribe. So it's very limiting when you get into the fringier stuff. I mean, they're very much about purity. It's kind of sad how America First consistently put down their own leader because he doesn't pass a purity test. He's like biracial, leading the white supremacists, and then he's advocating for the nuclear family as the salvation of Western civilization, but he's like a childless 30-year-old. And so he doesn't even fit their own standards. But it becomes this very off-putting purity test the further you go. And I think that the red pill is a way of reaching more people, but trying to filter them in. And that's why you do get a lot of the Hitler fan club types who come in here and they say, when are you guys going to talk about who's doing it all? Because if they can convince you that you're being zapped by 5G or poisoned by chemtrails, it raises the question, who's doing it? And so that's where they actually get people. They get you chasing the whodunit. And this whodunit thing, like everyone's an investigator solving a mystery. Get your magnifying glass out. Time to listen to Candace Owens. We're going to solve the mystery. As long as you're trying to figure out who did it, you're not figuring out what it is. And this is a very uncomfortable proposition because when you unveil what it is, well, then it points out that the things that people are reacting to aren't real. So then nobody did it. The whodunit question is invalid. The media did it. Government did it. You can't blame any particular group. Because you'll notice right now with this Candace Owens thing, they're reinforcing the far-right conspiracy paradigm that all conspiracies are ultimately from Israel and Israel controls America. That has been their standard talking point since the JFK assassination. And I think what they're doing with Candace Owens is they're rebooting that. They really need that to be baked into the far-right paradigm. Just like the far left, they blame racism and whites for everything. Far right, they blame Jews for everything. I mean, that's baked into the political horseshoe. That is structural. And so in order to reinforce that, this is why I think they did Charlie Kirk. Just like with JFK, I think they need to take this event and turn it into a conspiracy subculture that'll last another 50, 60 years, where they're all based around the same basic presumptions. That's why they're hammering it in. Let's Go says, the people who say stop talking about it, we figured it out, are hilarious. It's like, bro, you don't know the half of it. Well, that's been the issue here. That's been the issue since the beginning, where, and I called this out like 2 years ago. I noticed, why are so many of these conspiracy theorists on Twitter saying, it's a distraction, don't look. It's a distraction, stop feeding it your loose. Go touch grass. Like, okay, it's a distraction from what? You know, it's like, you want us to go out in the grass, touch the grass, do some yoga or something? We just found evidence of colossal fraud that implicates all governments, all media, and all kinds of people that we can name in entertainment. And you're telling us, don't look. Oh, don't get distracted. What are you talking about? You're distracting us from the thing we should be focusing on. And the reason why Trutherville has gone nowhere, why it's stagnant, it's stagnant. They haven't figured anything out. They're still confused. There are people who are still confused today. Like, well, I don't know if it was real or fake. It could be fake, but it could be real. Like, if you're ambiguous and confused and you don't have any intellectual independence and you can't form your own opinions, they got you. They got in your head. You're no longer in objective reality. You're in a state of confusion. You don't have to know all the answers. You can know what's possible to know. And if what the facts that you do find, if they contradict what is being said, the best you can say is, I don't believe it for these reasons. But you don't have to believe anything on faith. If the evidence doesn't support it, you're under no obligation to believe it. But I noticed that there was this trend, and I'm saying it's shady. Like, I think it's really shady that you have all these Christian conspiracy theorists who are using Jewish gematria to decode the news. Like, obviously that's crazy. Jewish gematria is meant for reading the Torah. Like, if you're a rabbi, you do your number magic to prove that there's a divine hand, that God is in the scriptures. Like, okay, this could not have been planned by man. These connections are too intricate. What are the odds? You know, these questions like, this is statistically impossible. Well, no, actually it's not. Because you're cherry picking, selectivity bias, Texas sharpshooter fallacy, not noticing the misses. No, you're manufacturing the appearance of these impressive connections. But it's completely manufactured. But I can understand why that would be attractive to people who are into mysticism. Yeah, sure, it's logically fallacious and fake, but religious people don't care. They just want to feel like they're connecting to God or to source or something. So I can understand using number magic, looking at your scriptures. But you have these conspiracy theorists who take these gematria calculators and they apply it to the news. And they're like, okay, well, Erika Kirk's name adds to 166 and 666 months ago. And they come up with these things. They say, look, this is a connection. Well, it is a connection, but you made it up. So does it mean anything? No. And my point of it is, all this does is it distracts from the fact that we can point to the humans using propaganda to manipulate humans. And what they're doing is they're attributing this to some higher power. And also has other implications. Because if you can use gematria calculators to decode events, then, therefore, you can conclude the people doing the events are doing gematria. Who's doing gematria? Rabbis. So they're able to decode events using the ciphers and codes of the people that they're indirectly scapegoating for doing the events. So it's just a lot of noise. It's a mess, is what I'm saying. It's a mess. They haven't figured out predictive programming. Some people still think predictive programming is some form of magic. That if enough people watch a movie, we will manifest it into reality. But the problem is, these wrong explanations are encouraged. They're taken seriously. And I've been blocking people and banning people who are still adhering to that stuff because we don't have time to take that stuff seriously. We've had enough. I think enough. We've spent enough time really breaking these things down. Like, the information's there. If you want to know how it works, I can explain it to you. But there's no reason to fall into these mystical explanations that conceal the culprits. So I used to hear from the people who would say, don't get distracted. From those people, they used to say, and it's the same exact people, they would say, there's no way man could have organized all these connections, so there's a higher power at work. So here I am suggesting that the psyops that we experience and the relevant entertainment content content are actually connected, that it's part of a singular agenda. So we're talking about the entrainment of fake events and entertainment. And I'd get these people who would, much bigger channels than us, they would just drown us out and they would say, no way man could do all this. Like a mantra. Like an army of NPCs where they're all saying the same thing. This has to be higher than man. Man could not have done this. What do you mean? Propaganda can operate through any vector whatsoever. The idea that entertainment is somehow not connected to the psyops has been refuted by the IPS think tank. But a lot of people were against this notion even being entertained. So I brought it up. I'm saying this is almost like saying that computer hacking, computer viruses are actually demons. No way man could be that sophisticated. No way man could have hacked the computer. It's got to be a gremlin. So if you attribute something to gremlins because you don't think man can do it, that might work for you, but what does that do? Well, it lets the hackers get away with it because people don't believe in hackers because man couldn't be that. No, it's got to be gremlins. And what I'm saying is that we have found the hackers, the reality hackers, the meta scripters, the existence of the meta script, which informs our collective mass agreed upon hallucination. We have identified it. And we're examining the architecture, and now we're getting into the nuance. So to get back to that person who's mad that we're still talking about Charlie Kirk, well, we're still mapping it out. And if you've already done this, show me your work. If you have a more extensive mind map breakdown of all of the predictive and concurrent programming related to the Charlie Kirk event, send it to me so that I can stop. But here we are, we're still gathering facts to support our claims. And they're like, no, move on. No, that's a very shallow take. And again, it doesn't lead anywhere. What we're doing is leading somewhere because what we have realized is that there is no place on the world stage in main or alternative media. There is no place for people who are cognizant of media fakery. No, if you have too much situational awareness, you don't get a platform. Your opinions don't matter. So what we have done is we have separated. We have a separate demographic of media analysts who are very well apprised of media fakery, long-term, short-term media manipulation, news bending, history bending, hoax indicators. We have studied this extensively, and our reference points are things that we find through empirical research. We're not using mystical calculators or magical thinking. This is a skeptical take on world events, and what we have arrived at by studying it as we have been and keeping things in context and noting the continuity, event to event to event to event, what we have realized here is that there is a purpose. The purpose is the proactive manufacturing of history collectively. And this is a worldwide, successful, ongoing conspiracy that none of the conspiracy theorists have even noticed yet. They can't see it. And a lot of them are just incredulous. There's no way they write the news in advance. What are you talking about? Every single psyop is a news event. Every single psyop is written in advance. You automatically accept that premise. Now we can debate on how far in advance. And then once we get into the facts, you'll see, well, the facts support the notion here that the major events, the big ones, are usually planned 10, 15, or 30 years in advance. And so what does that mean? If true, then what? If major events on the world stage are planned decades in advance, it has significant implications for media, for government, for really virtually everything about politics. It raises very significant questions. And we're not going to stop asking these questions and finding the answers. Meanwhile, the people who are looking for the next, hit of red pill have already moved on. Oh, you've already moved on. Okay. You're in the cycle still. We're outside of their cycle. I'm not falling for this stuff. I'm not a media literalist. Oh, Sam says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Yeah, Carl Jung is been an obsession of mine for the last few months. JT33 says, Tron Ares about AI programs that can transcend the digital world into reality. Oh, I'm going to have to go watch that. Joe Rogan was talking about, why couldn't Jesus just come back as AI? So we're there. DeWitt Celeste says, these same people think that 9/11 wars are real, but using product placement in movies, advertising, art is beyond what a group could accomplish. Yeah, exactly. Their point of view is that it is so hard for me to understand how you could have media connecting to events that I can't believe it. And that's an appeal to personal incredulity. But it looks impossible. Like how the hell does a movie come out on Netflix and then something on the news perfectly matches it? And this happens all the time. How does that happen? Well, you have to break free of the compartmentalization. You can't assume that there are no connections between these various departments at a higher level. So is there a meaningful distinction between government and entertainment, between the film industry and mainstream media, between Hollywood and CNN? Well, there's a point here where there's a overarching influence, a worldview monopoly that has creative control and the capacity to exert influence through every mainstream platform. And that's what we're connecting here. And what the go-to response for years has been by truthers is, this is so complex, it's got to mean we're in a simulation. I still see people falling for that. I saw some guy who had a pretty good breakdown of Snake Eyes, and I said, well, you got to look at Hulu's The Tempest. He couldn't process it. He gave me an emoji of a smiley face with a nuke exploding on the head, and he said, the fabric of reality has torn. Oh, Sam says, why do people think government would leave something like history up to chance? Right. Well, and again, the fact of it is, if you've already accepted the premise that psyops are real, which they are, so it's not even an opinion, but if you acknowledge psychological operations, well, what is a psychological operation? It's beyond just a PR stunt. It's a manufactured historic event. Because every psyop they do creates an event. The event, although simulated, is considered real by the system. It's designated real. So then you could say, okay, wait, if it's real and it's in the news and then the news becomes history, so it goes into our history, so our history is being in fact augmented by events that are planned in advance. So then we can get into the argument of how far back each event was planned. Like, when did the script, because every drill, like every simulated event, a mass casualty simulation, they all have a script. And so then it's reasonable to say that every one of these fake events has a script. They're not just improving. There's no improvisational crisis acting. No, this is all scripted. So then you have to say, well, where's the script? How long ago did the script exist? And when you dig into these questions and answers, it undermines all of the claims of mass media when it comes to these events. It suggests here that we're looking at manufactured events, not innocent media reporters with cameras and microphones going out and just recording something. No, they're actually producing it. Because media is a liar. It's a good liar. And good liars don't lie with every breath. They lie strategically when they're gaining something. And they lie to those who already trust them. But they don't lie all the time, because that would make them a bad liar. So the media doesn't always fabricate stuff. Not all news is fake. And there were times where people would try to straw man what we're doing. Oh, they just say everything's fake. No, we have a very nuanced take. But to the contrary, the people who default to the mainstream actually believe everything on TV is real. So it's kind of like, well, whether you say everything's real or everything's fake, you're both wrong. So if we put a number on it, let's say 5% of the events are simulated. So 95% of the news is real, 5% is simulated. The simulated stuff is what takes up all the oxygen. It's what takes the spotlight. Everyone focuses on it, and then the 95% bounce off of it. So the fake stuff, even though it's only 5%, it permeates the entire media ecosystem. So it's a closed system, it's an echo chamber, so they don't have to fake it all. They just need to fake the big stories that bend the news cycles. But even this, even the 95%, even though they're just responding to fake stuff, they are also resting upon an edifice of fakery. They're resting upon news cycle after news cycle of fake events or fake infused news. So there's no objective reality from the perspective of the mainstream media. They live in their own fictional universe, which they impose onto us. So it's very much a fictional universe situation. Even if you're being honest, if you're resting upon a lot of lies, what does that say about your perspective? Well, it's skewed. So then news bending refers to the ability of news media to manufacture events, and everything reinforces it. So you have your real timeline, the one that we live on, and then we have the simulated one, the fake events. And the real bends toward fake. Fake dominates real. That's because we are in a mind war, and our internalized version of the world has been intentionally augmented, warped, and modified. Like we're programmed. I say programmed because you go to a play, or you go to a symphony or something, and you get a program and it tells you this is going to be at 8, 9, 10, 11. You just go through the program. This is what's going to happen. Well, when it comes to these fake events, every one of these scripts exists on this bigger program. And this program goes presumably 30 years or more into the future. That's what I'm saying. And the people who go along with the fake stuff without challenging it are the programmed. They are going with the bent version of reality, the warped version, the fictionalized, or the fiction infused, the news bent, which again is a reference to the 1968 play News Benders. But looking at it from a wider perspective, and I really started thinking about this when I learned about the connection between the director John Frankenheimer, director of The Manchurian Candidate, and his relationship with the Kennedys, and his connection to the RFK assassination. And this is the guy who invented the idea of the mind-controlled assassin. When I looked at that, I was like, wait, so they've been bending news with fake events using Hollywood, essentially, movies, to infuse our reality. They've been doing this since the 60s, at least. So then the term news bending doesn't go far enough, because history itself has been bent. So the result of it is the shared consensus worldview that the masses agree upon is one that rests upon a lot of provable lies. It's a distorted version. They're living in an internalized version of things that we can prove false. That this is obviously non-objective. And it's not all that different from a religious cult. If you're in a religious cult, like you have two people side by side, person A, atheist, person B, religious cult. Well, they look the same from the outside, but the person who's in the religious cult has built-in presuppositions that frame their perspective on the world. So their reality's been augmented. So that's the main distinction here. We have the augmented version of reality and the real thing. All media operates within the augmented reality, all of it, even the alternative, all the red pill stuff. They don't discredit what came before. That's why we have to have the off-world stage perspective, because our perspective is not only cognizant of real-time media fakery, but we remain aware of all the fakery accumulated to that point, starting from the past. So this does require a complete separation from the subjective media universe. And this is why we are reverse engineering events with nuance, and more importantly, exposing the architecture of media itself. and how it differs from what media consumers think that it is. So they think they're being informed, but they're being conformed to a prefabricated worldview. Sort of like if you listen to a liar, you think you're being told the truth, but you're being manipulated with falsehoods to control how you perceive reality. So we're looking at what I call the lie world order, but essentially it's systemic fakery, and the fakery is built into the system because they're manufacturing our history proactively. And you know what's interesting is how many people are into things like mud flood or Tartaria, various theories about how our history that we look at our past is actually manipulated, that there's huge things that have been lied about. We're living in a post-reset world. All these people willing to entertain the idea that our history's been messed with retroactively, or it was altered in the past. But then I would ask them, at what point did history become honest? At some point, did it just become objective? And then another question, when does news become history? Yesterday, last month, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? So if you look at the daily news as pages in a history book in the making, you can kind of see how day by day fake history is manufactured. So I kind of advise people, instead of looking at fake history from 200 years ago, look at fake history today. And then the next part of it is recognizing that it's not retroactive alone, but it's actually the proactive. And it's the proactive thing that the conspiracy theorists have missed, and it's the how far in advance things are planned. But my intention here, and the reason why I'm spending time on this series of mind maps with this history bending, is this is something that can be demonstrated to be true. The facts support what I'm proposing here. But it's not something you can just say to somebody, like, oh, trust me, bro, everything's fake. Let's move on. Like, no, that's not how this works. We're talking about paradigm shift. You don't paradigm shift by being incredulous. You have to be skeptical, and you have to propose an alternative model that has a better explanation for what we're all experiencing. I mean, how do you explain predictive programming, concurrent programming? Eerie coincidences? Doesn't work. Intentionality is provable. Simulation theory? No. I mean, the only people who believe that are Joe Rogan fans. Braveheart says, without gematria, how do we explain the significance of these? Yeah, well, we can look at patterns without having to know what the group behind the patterns believes these things actually mean. Like, I don't think there's an objective meaning to these things. It's attached by whatever group holds them to be meaningful. So it's undeniable that we see patterns, that there are patterns with certain numbers, names, etc. But the best we can do is recognize the patterns. If you bring out your gematria calculator and attempt to interpret these things, you're moving a step away from objective reality and getting into subjectivism. Like, people will say stuff like, I saw one yesterday, a few of them, where they were just finding out how many different ways you could put Barack Obama in a sentence and make it add to 666. That is not a rigorous methodology that you could use to produce or arrive at conclusions that we could rest upon. No, it's just pure subjectivism. So we have to demystify. And so I think the gematria crowd is there to mystify the patterns. So those of us noticing patterns are outnumbered by people who are infusing the conversation with mystical explanations and directing it away from the more mundane explanation that we're looking at an operation of government. And I got more pushback over my suggestion that entertainment media is part of the psyop entertainment complex, that these things are connected. I get more pushback on that than anything. And I've been trying to figure out why, and I think I know why. And I think it has to do with the fact that we can name directors, artists, musicians with no plausible deniability, as we can with various media personalities and celebrities and politicians. We can point out people who are directly connected to the manufacturing of fake events. I mean, starting with Donald Trump. You can't say that Donald Trump is a useful idiot or he's somehow insulated about everything, because no, he actually had to put the ketchup on his face. When you get into the Kirk thing, everybody in his inner circle who helped move his body to the SUV, well, they would be in the know about the squib. Squibgate. But the more you map it out and tie in the directors and the conditioning through foreshadowing, you can actually unveil the conspiracy. And you cannot unveil the conspiracy if you get people to tell you to not pay attention. Like, oh, don't be distracted. It's ironic because they're the ones who are distracted. They don't actually have a point or a purpose. Like, we don't need legions of people crying wolf or stating the obvious, just saying fake, fake, fake. That's not helpful. What we need is empirical research, rigorous methodology, and we need to arrive at answers. And we have arrived at answers. The IPS think tank coined the term concurrent programming, which didn't exist before we had acknowledged it, this term. So there's no way to explain it. But as soon as we noticed it, then we started becoming aware of it real time. And so we've made a lot of progress since, I say, 2022 in this regard. And so those people who are still stuck in the old paradigm with the old operating system, who don't know about predictive concurrent reinforcement programming, fake events, manufactured future, leave them. I mean, you can let people figure things out at their own pace, but the facts support our side. So I don't entertain these old explanations anymore. The simulation people, revelation of the method people, the manifestors, all the mystics and the mystifiers, like at this point, they can be disregarded. We have a better model and we can prove it. And that's what I'm working on. Anyway, thanks for listening. We'll have a live stream later today with open phones. I was just running some errands, and I'm going to answer something because someone said yesterday, how do you reason that the Charlie Kirk event was scripted in 98 or before? Could they have not have been inspired by Snake Eyes? Like maybe they got the ideas from the movie and put it into the psyop. What came first? And my way of answering it was showing how every example of entertainment content foreshadowing the assassination, every example contained the same, at least 3 out of 5 of the same elements that were in Snake Eyes, or 4 out of 5. And that these are different propaganda vectors that in no way would have been connected to Snake Eyes. So what we're looking at here is the deliberate connections. These are deliberately planted messages and storylines and characters. And that's another element here. In addition to fake events, there are fake people. Fake people inserted into our world stage. People who exist in flesh and blood, but who are in fact playing out roles. And one of the things that I think, this is actually a deal breaker for people who want to say that we're just analyzing coincidences. What really destroyed that is what I call the Erika Kirk conundrum. Because since 9/10, every major move that Erika Kirk has made on the world stage has paralleled her characters, plural, her characters. In Hulu's The Tempest, in Heads of State, and it with such specificity here that the only logical conclusion you could reach is that this is intentional. Because real people don't follow along with scripts, and the implication here is that this person is following a script. Well, anyway, I gotta go. I've got to deal with someone here. All right, we'll be back later.